And this young man, Jake, who actually goes to the Ratio Christi meeting. I think he's just kind of a provocateur. He just likes to go and mess with the Christians. He's not a Christian himself.
Yeah.
Well done, Jake. I too like to think of myself as a provocateur of the Christians. Let's see what you got. Welcome to Paulogia, where a former Christian takes a look at the claims of Christians. And today, we're going to visit the vocal Christian apologist, Dr. Frank Turek, on one of his college Q&A sessions.
I had talked about how the New Testament has eyewitness testimony in it, and here's what Jake said about it. Let's go.
So I just wanted to address something that you said in an answer you gave to someone else earlier, and it's this idea of, I forget the exact words you used, like the traumatic event. What was the specific verb?
Impact event.
Impact event, yeah. And you used like reports on 9/11, like remembering where you were on 9/11 for an example of this, segueing that into sort of evidence for perhaps the legitimacy of reports on the resurrection. Personally, I come from a psychology background. That's what I study here at UNCW. So I just wanted to bring up, I think it's interesting that you would use this as a topic and specifically use 9/11 as an example. Because as you can probably imagine, 9/11 is one of the most heavily studied impact events in the contemporary history of modern science. And it might seem a bit counterintuitive, but your intuitions on this are exactly and perfectly wrong. As it turns out, the very large amount of people have demonstrably false claims about where they were on 9/11. There's a lot of science and a lot of interesting things that go into this.
Jake is correct. This two-phase study examined how people's memories of the 9/11 terrorist attacks changed over time. Phase 1 surveyed nearly 3,000 people from different U.S. cities at 3 points. 1 week after 9/11, 11 months later, and 35 months later, it asked about people's personal memories of where they were and what they were doing when they learned about the attacks, called flashbulb memories, as well as their factual knowledge about the events. Phase 2 followed up with participants 10 years after 9/11, re-examining both their flashbulb memories and event memories, and here's what they found. Both personal flashbulb memories and factual knowledge became less accurate over time, with the biggest drop happening in the first year. After that initial decline, memory stabilized, showing little additional forgetting between years 3 and 10. People remained highly confident in their flashbulb memories, even as they became less accurate. This high confidence persisted even after 10 years. Emotional aspects of memories faded faster than other details, and continued to be less consistently remembered over the full 10-year period. Factual knowledge was influenced by factors like media coverage and conversations about 9/11, while personal flashbulb memories were not clearly linked to any predictive factors. This pattern held true even after 10 years. Over time, people tended to stick with their inaccurate flashbulb memories, repeating rather than correcting them. In contrast, inaccurate factual knowledge was more likely to be corrected, especially for critical facts about the attacks. External influences like video footage could improve accuracy of some factual memories even years later. Overall, this long-term study suggests our memories of dramatic events are less reliable than we tend to believe, and that our confidence in a memory is not a good indicator of its accuracy. However, it also found that memory does stabilize to some degree after the first year. The study highlights how emotional public events can create long-lasting, but not always reliable memories, and how social factors can shape the retention of factual knowledge over time.
A reason you use to support this claim is actually one of the reasons that's used to show why it's false. Hearing something over and over leads to a belief. I guess you seem to enjoy your cultural references, so one I might use to point this out is on the Luke, I'm your father versus no, I'm your father, where the vast majority of people might have at one point believed that the sentence was Luke, I'm your father, when that's just not the case.
The phrase, Luke, I am your father, is a classic example of the Mandela Effect, a phenomenon where a large group of people collectively misremembers a specific detail or event. In reality, the actual line spoken by Darth Vader in The Empire Strikes Back is no.
No, I am your father.
However, many people vividly recall the line as including Luke's name. This discrepancy between widespread memory and documented reality is what characterizes the Mandela Effect. The term Mandela Effect was coined by Fiona Broome in 2009 when she discovered that many people falsely remembered Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, when he actually died in 2013. Since then, numerous other examples have been identified, ranging from misremembered movie quotes to changes in brand logos. Some believe these shared false memories are evidence of parallel universes or timeline alterations, while skeptics attribute them to the fallibility of human memory and the influence of popular culture. The "Luke, I am your father" misquote demonstrates how pervasive and convincing these collective misremembrances can be, even for iconic moments in popular media. The 9/11 memory studies and the Mandela Effect both show how human memory can be unreliable and confident, yet inaccurate. However, the 9/11 studies examined how real memories of a significant event changed over time, while the Mandela Effect involves widespread false memories of often trivial details. The 9/11 research was a controlled scientific study, whereas the Mandela Effect is a cultural phenomenon. Both highlight memory's malleability, but differ in scope, subject matter, and the role of external influences on memory accuracy.
So just wanted to see if you had a response to that, where you using these two pieces of evidence, when in reality, it's been very heavily studied that the claims you're making are patently false.
I think if we surveyed everybody in this room who's old enough, they would know where they were on 9/11.
Sure, they might think they do. But that's sort of the point, right? Is any answer you give, you believe to be true. Okay. But the point of the studies is to show that these beliefs are impossible.
Close. The point of the study is that these flash memories, like where we were and what we were doing, are likely to be incorrect, while we are simultaneously more likely in these situations to be falsely confident.
Okay, Jake, I know exactly where I was, who I was talking to, and what was on the TV at the time.
Leave it to Frank to be oblivious to the fact that he's reinforcing the student's point.
Secondly, it might be the case that, yes, people get wrong certain details, but do you think anybody at 9/11 in Manhattan would mistake that the Twin Towers fell that day?
In the 9/11 memory studies, flashbulb memories refer to personal recollections of where one was and what they were doing when learning about the attacks, while factual knowledge relates to specific details about the event itself. Flashbulb memories were measured for consistency over time, while factual knowledge was assessed for accuracy. Factual knowledge was affected by media exposure and conversations about 9/11, whereas flashbulb memories weren't clearly linked to any predictive factors. Inaccurate flashbulb memories tended to be repeated over time, while errors in factual knowledge were more likely to be corrected or improved by external sources. Where this does intersect with the Mandela Effect is that people can become quote-unquote corrected by false information, and the false memory becomes the group memory.
Probably not.
No.
But that's not the claim.
Yeah, that is the claim I'm making is that they would have known if he had risen from the dead.
Sure.
Okay, that's the point. Not that they might remember every single detail, but they will say, I saw him, I witnessed him.
Sure.
Just like the people at 9/11 said, I saw those things came down, I will never forget it. That's the point I'm making.
I'm sorry, Frank, but I need to call BS on this one. You're shifting the goalposts and modifying your claim now that you've been caught. Let's roll the tape on the segment that Jake was commenting on.
It would be like today if you wanted to write a history of, say, 9/11, which is 22 years ago. And you went and interviewed eyewitnesses. Some of them are in this room. And they told you what happened. Would it matter that you wrote it 22 years later? Or would the source from the event itself be authoritative?
You could lose it in translation from what they saw, memorized for 20 years, and then you publish.
You could misremember things, but there's something known as an impact event. An impact event is something you don't forget. You might forget what you had for breakfast this morning, but you won't forget something that happened 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago if you're old enough. Now, you're not,
There may be a couple of us in here that are this old. Let me ask a question. Only a few of you are going to raise your hand. How many people in here can remember where you were and what you were doing November 22nd, 1963? Raise your hand and hold it up. You see these people with their hands up? These people are very old, okay? November 22nd, 1963 is my earliest memory. I was 2 years old and 2 days. And I'm standing in the living room in our home in Wanamassett, New Jersey, and my mother is sitting on an ottoman in front of a black and white TV, weeping uncontrollably. Mommy, what's the matter? They killed the president. They killed the president. President Kennedy assassinated that day. I can still see in my mind right now my mother when she was 26 years old, sitting on that ottoman. She's 86 today, but I can see her when she was 26. I remember what I said to her. And I remember what she said to me. And that was 60 years ago.
Frank, everything you're describing there is part of the flashpoint memory, what you were doing, and it seems how you were feeling emotionally. Would you propose, Frank, that your memory of your mother crying means that you are a reliable source for the forensic details about the Kennedy shooting?
Back and to the left. Back and to the left.
Or did you glean all your facts about it later from other sources, even though you are, rightly or wrongly, confident about your circumstances?
You remember where you were and what you were doing. Why? Because it was an impact event.
Or, as Jake would say...
Sure, they might think they do.
Now, if Jesus rose from the dead, do you think that would have been an impact event?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think they would have forgotten about it? Do you think they would have had any trouble remembering what he said and did?
The studies say yes, they would, but Frank's intuition says...
Probably not, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so just like you can interview people here today about 9/11 and get an accurate account, so could the New Testament writers, and many of them were eyewitnesses themselves.
So Blue Shirt Frank says we can get an accurate account, and Backtracking Maroon Shirt Frank says...
Well, the claim I'm making is that they would have known if he had risen from the dead.
Sure.
Okay, that's the point. Not that they might remember every single detail.
I mean, most definitions of biblical inerrancy demand that they got right every detail. But let's digress. From the studies mentioned, we know that the personal relationship to the event becomes most solidified, and the details about the event are continually pliable, subject to change based on external influences. The Mandela Effect tells us that the pliability needn't be toward accuracy. It can lead us to remember things that never were. Sure, the towers falling did happen, and the video reinforcement locked it in for most of us, but there wasn't video replay in the first century, or even a written Bible. It was just oral stories. So when people hear that Jesus was raised often enough, that might well become how they remember it.
I don't know where you're reading this kind of thing, but the New Testament documents are written within the lifetime of the eyewitnesses, by eyewitnesses or people that knew eyewitnesses.
Well, that's the real question, isn't it? This question of the reliability of memory is relevant to gospel discussion only if we can first come to the conclusion that the content of the gospels come from witnesses. While I suspect there are probably kernels of historical memory here and there, like Jesus was probably a real person from Nazareth who had some followers, said some apocalyptic things, and was eventually killed. That doesn't require the gospel writers to have been or had access to witnesses at all. They were writing down the traditions that had coalesced in the 40 years between when Jesus died and the first gospel, Mark, was written by non-witness.
For example, Luke, who was a doctor and interviewed eyewitnesses.
If you haven't seen it already, you should check out this video on the Myth Vision channel based on a scholarly article by Chrissy Hansen on how first-century authors of biographies would often invent fictional witnesses to make their stories seem more accurate. It's quite an eye-opener.
It's pretty safe to say Luke's claims of using eyewitnesses are likely bogus, just mimicking the usual rhetorical strategies of Greco-Roman writers.
Okay, and I just wanted to show you that the way in which you had phrased impact events and how they affect testimony.
How did I say it wrongly?
So what it seemed to me, the point you were making, was that the fact that people were, the fact that this event was an impact event for these people leads the testimony to be more likely to be accurate.
Yes.
So the response I would give is that just because something is shown to be an impact event doesn't necessarily mean that it's more likely to be accurate. In fact, it has been shown that the opposite can just as easily, if not more easily, be true.
Okay, well, we'd have to look at those studies because personal experience does not bear that out.
Forget decades-long scientific studies, everyone. Frank's personal intuition is in conflict. With epistemology like this, Frank would definitely have rejected that the Earth is round and revolves around the sun. His personal experience does not bear that out.
Okay, yeah, of course. I'm saying this less to like change your mind on this and more to sort of put this out there that the things that you're saying might not necessarily be true. And
well done, Jake. Keep following Frank around and let his audience know that the things he's saying might not necessarily be true. And that's what I do here on my channel. If you'd like to see more of this former Christian taking a look at the claims of Christians, please tap on the thumbnail on screen now, and I'll see you over there. Until next time, later.